I know most of my viewers are men, and don't know how I know that, but I do, okay? And I want to ask everyone who's watching this video right now. Have you ever learned to have sex? No? Good, because it ain't happening! And I'm gonna hammer that point down on every single person who watches this video. Not literally. You know what I mean. I am not gay. Ignoring what I just said, let's talk about video games for a second. In most video games, there is a very clear line of quality. That line of quality is usually based on the kind of developer that is creating that game. The individual developer, which is like 1 to 10 people tops, and then there's the AAA studio, which is at the very least like 120 people. You can very easily recognize the difference in these kind of games, not only on quality, but also, holy shit, AAA studios are always funded by these stupid, dumb-ass, shitty companies. And I mean, I guess there is that little space in between that I like to call an indie studio, but that typically isn't as common. Most indie developers have about the skill of at least half of a AAA studio, but in comparison to the studio, their budget is about as much as a lemonade stand in Ethiopia, whereas most AAA games have absurdly high budgets. When playing AAA games, you can clearly appreciate the amount of budget that went into it. Even if playing the game is nearly as painful as giving birth, at least the graphics are good. When playing an indie game, on the other hand, it usually is super fucking fun, but trying to look at the game will make your cock go from rock hard to spaghetti noodle in under 5 milliseconds. And this doesn't just go from gameplay and graphics, this is also a problem with the story too. AAA games have these really high budget cutscenes that actually look like movies, and then indie games just have like lines of text. I think that the difference between AAA and indie is especially reflected in the horror genre. You have games like Silent Hill and Resident Evil, and then you have games like Mad Murder's Mystery Pie Shop. You know, honestly, I gotta give props to the developer here. He really captured the feeling of a migraine headache. You know, I might be a hypocrite for saying this, but you haven't had sex. Now, don't get me wrong, I hate AAA companies, I hate crunch, and I hate all the stupid workplace conditions that developers have in studios. AAA games suck just as much as indie games do, but indie games have a special kind of suck. Keep in mind, I'm talking about this only in the genre of horror, but I swear to God, every single damn indie horror game is built for someone with like terminal arthritis. There is no gameplay here. Most indie horror games have a really stupid story, and they all try to parry off of Five Nights at Freddy's. I'll get into that later. But because they have such a generic and slowly running story, they can't create gameplay in between. So what the actual game ends up being is just a walking simulator where you hold W and click shit for 10 minutes. If you can play the entire game with your pinky finger, there's something wrong here. Now don't get me wrong, a lot of indie horror games have been really successful for good reason, like FNAF and a couple others, but those are actually designed to make the person who's playing feel at least a little bit of intensity, even if they're not scared. But what most horror games end up doing is being walking simulators, where they put you and a monster in a maze and go, collect keys, asshole. How about this? I shove a key up your asshole, huh? How'd you like that? Both indie and AAA studios are also equally as bad at doing this. I see why they titled the game Amnesia, because after playing it, I felt like I had it. Scary? Yes. Fun? I want to shove a spoon up my asshole. Recently, this 80s VHS aesthetic horror shit called analog horror has popped up. And I gotta admit, it's kind of fucking good. When it's created cleverly. I'm pretty sure that Five Nights at Freddy's kind of started this shit with their whole VHS thing, but up until like the Mandela Catalog and the Walton Files, it's never really been popular on YouTube. But those things that I just listed were popular for good reason.
I'm over here stroking
Because what they're doing is they're taking the janky shit that people dealt with the VHS tapes and old computers and are making it into something far scarier than it was ever intended to be. Now, I would throw in some generic ass quote right here like, no man is ever immune to greed, but I'm just gonna tell you straight up, everyone has wide assholes. Wider than mine, which is really saying something. And so people get greedy and they think, man, you know, I'm really not that good at modeling characters. Why don't I just make it look like shit and then hide behind the fact that it's a VHS aesthetic and then get people to go on my game?
Which is exactly what has fucking happened multiple times.
Like, I understand that a lot of times people really aren't that great at modeling characters, and you know, indie developers, as I said, don't really have the budget to hire people to do that or do that themselves. But there are so many more clever ways to implement your shitty graphics than just hiding behind this overdone VHS aesthetic. Five Nights at Freddy's and all of the other popular horror games hit a certain bar, and there is a way to hit that bar. But that way is not to turn a fun game into a walking simulator. That way is not to fill your game with secret hidden lore. And that way is definitely not copying this VHS horror trope. If you have a unique game,
fucking make it!
I assure you, it will be so much more successful than any fucking copy you could ever think of.
Because, like I say a lot with these games, is they don't have to be a Five Nights at Freddy's game. If you have a scary concept, you can just make your own animatronics and sell it as your own game. It doesn't even have to be animatronics, it could be any kind of monster. If you have a great piece, you know...
Typically, we don't talk about serious topics on this channel, but...
You haven't had sex.
Going back on what I said earlier, people have wide assholes. They're greedy, and they are on the never-ending quest to stuff as much shit as they can into their asshole, which is usually money. This is really not the best analogy for them. And as I've proven time and time again with, you know, Raccoon mixtapes and a bunch of other stuff, you really don't need to put effort into the online world in order to start making money off of it. Which leads a lot of developers to believe that if you just copy something, or you make it very similar to something, you can be just as, if not more successful than that thing you're trying to copy. And this is why a lot of the more popular indie studio and individual horror games have been kinda similar to each other. Innocent things turned evil is probably one of the biggest tropes that all the fucking horror games try to copy off of. Of course, the easiest example is Five Nights at Freddy's. He's taking the idea of the, like, Chuck E. Cheese animatronics and turning them into evil beings that fucking stuff children into themselves. I don't remember the lore of Bendy because I never fucking played the game, but what that game did is it turned all of the old kids cartoons into alive creatures that tried to attack you. And now, of course, more recently, Poppy's Playtime, where you're in an abandoned children's toy factory and they're all attacking you. Notice how every single one of those examples I just listed ended in a Y. And also notice how every single one of those examples I just listed are all things to do with children. This is how so many kids got so easily grasped on all of these horror games, is that they're taking things that they were already familiar with and turning them evil. And sometimes this happens when it's not even intended, like, you know... But because of how annoyingly popular this trope has gotten, it's kind of ruining the way indie horror games work and how they take off. AAA games don't have to worry about this because they're AAA and people will play anything AAA, and these are very popular franchises. Ironically, I think a pretty good example of the competition in the indie horror game industry is, of course, with Poppy's Playtime vs. Venge. And no, I'm not talking about the plagiarism allegations or whatever. If you want to know about that, just watch this video. Both creators had beef with each other and had very similar concepts that, of course, did all that classic stuff where they parry off of other horror games, and the one got far more popular than the other one ever did. The human asshole can only expand to about 8 inches, but somehow people figure out how to get wider than that, and they get more and more greedy. And then we end up having a situation like what happened with Hello Neighbor, where they desperately tried to fill their game with secret lore and beg for theory videos because they want more people to play their game so they can make more money. The Kickstarter for Poppy Toby's Playtime was a complete scam. They made their game, which was essentially another walking simulator tech demo that takes like 10 minutes to complete, $5 fucking. When they released the second chapter of this game, it was admittedly a lot more fun and dynamic than the first chapter. But instead of releasing it with the game that had the first chapter, they basically just released it as a completely separate thing. Chapter 2 costed $10, but it's okay, guys, because we made the first chapter free, except, wait, you made it what? The developers of this game have unintentionally scammed millions of people for $5. Now, of course, you can get your money back if you do all that Steam bullshit, but you still kind of, you know, why do you have to release the chapters as separate parts of the game? Why not you just put them all into one big package, change this stupid merch section to chapters, and then people can play them. Just keep the price the same. However, judging by what I just mentioned about the Kickstarter, I think they had full knowledge of what they were doing. Check out this fucking dumbass Steam review I found. Why are people so bent over $5? It's literally no money. You got something. Many games have gone free before, like Destiny 2 or insert MMO here. You didn't even lose much, save the outrage for the people who really got scammed. Now, I would say he brought up a good point, but quote and I quote, $5 is literally no money. You wanna know what's also literally no money, my friend? Well, let me just log into my bank account real quick. This seems like the kind of game that goes on for a lot longer than it should. How much money are you willing to bet that they're gonna do this with the next chapter? I don't know about you, but I'm willing to bet $5.
Holly is in the newsroom with a new game parents need to watch out for it. Holly, this is pretty unsettling.
It is unsettling, Steve and Jeanette, and it's called, innocently enough, the Huggy Wuggy game. And while it may sound innocent, like I said, it could actually be really traumatic for some children. So joining us now from Parents.com, who reported on the game, is editor...
What the fuck? They made an entire ass news segment about the Huggy Wuggy game and how it's so traumatic for children. Dude, oh my god, so traumatic. It looks like my face after eating a sandwich made out of mayo. Oh my god. You fucking dumbasses from Parents.com talking about how scary the Huggy Wuggy game is when you should be really reporting on something like... Dutch, I got tuberculosis. Okay, hear me out. Tacos, but mayo. Also, you haven't had sex. I know a lot of what I said in this video is kind of contradicting other things that I've said in the past and also in this video, but as I've stated before, I can be a hypocrite, my points still stand, and I'm asking people to understand my point. What a lot of people say when it comes to this kind of topic is that people can't be original anymore because all the topics have been so overdone, but I think otherwise. I think that people absolutely can be original, but they won't be. And the reason developers won't be original is because they know that it's going to be so much easier for their game to take off if they play into one of the overdone tropes like VHS and innocent things turned evil. Those are the only two examples I gave in this video, but there are plenty more tropes that all kinds of horror games try and copy off of. Individual developers are scared that their game won't take off because these generic tropes are getting so popular and in such annoying ways. And so as a result, we've seen a huge depression of the quality in individual horror games. And what's even more discouraging is that the ones that have been recently getting popular either come from scummy history or they just get desperate for more in their game. And then eventually we get to what happened with Hello Neighbor. The point of the game is completely changed and the developers are putting more money into merchandise than they are getting out of it. I think most of what I said in this video should serve as an example of what indie developers shouldn't do with their games. It's okay okay if your game doesn't take off an initial impact. In fact, better even, because then you have plenty of room and time to improve whatever about the game you thought wasn't perfect. And being something that people view as obscure can actually be beneficial for you. Most people, when they find something that looks interesting but isn't really popular, they're gonna want to click on it. Look at, for example, Iron Lung. Sure, you can say what you want about how fun the game is, because, you know, you like barely move throughout the entire playthrough. You legitimately cannot even see your surroundings in that game, but it introduced something unique and got popular years after it was created. Moral of the story, you haven't had... I don't even know why I'm gonna make the joke, you know what I'm gonna say.